Okay, looks like it's happening. New introduction because this is for the video. Hello everyone, David Adler, President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I'm delighted to have a very, very special guest from Israel, Lital, who's more than a news anchor. You're a news anchor and commentator, I think, with Channel 14 in Israel. Welcome to Australia.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Lital, for anyone who doesn't know, which I suspect is the majority of people, what is Channel 14? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for coming and for having me. So Channel 14 is a leaning right news channel in Israel. It's been established around 7-8 years ago in order to create a variety of opinions in the media outlets sphere in Israel. It's been a very successful channel in the past 2 years or so, beating the rest of the other channels' ratings. We have a variety of shows. I'm doing the 5 o'clock, 5 in the evening news shows. I have a panel every evening with a variety of opinion. I'm trying to get as many opinions as I can on my show to really create to do good television and to do a good news shows. So that's basically our channel.
So, did you say it's actually the highest rating TV station now?
I would say it's the second highest after
rating.
Channel 12. Yeah.
That's in only 7 years. That's remarkable.
Yeah, it's been a hard work. Yeah. And it's a private channel, not a public channel.
That's important. We have a problem with the public channels sometimes. I think that exists all over the world. So I guess if you were to look at the newsprint in Israel, it would be more of Arutz Sheva than Haaretz, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, 100%. Haaretz, I don't know if many people know, but Haaretz is like a far left newspaper in Israel. Not a good source if you ask me to get the news from Israel, because it's not really reflecting what is happening in Israel. It's mostly, I don't know, it has like 3% of readers among Israelis, very, very weak newspaper, so I wouldn't take that as a source for the news in Israel.
Yeah. Now, you've commented that Israel in the media, particularly when it comes to some of the hard edge issues like terrorism, does not get reasonable coverage. What do you think that's all about?
Yeah. I think first of all, the international media, what you have to understand is that they are obsessed with Israel, obsessed with what is happening in Israel. When you open the New York Times, every single day you'll find an item about Israel. And like when you compare it to any other conflict zones in the world, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Cyprus, Turkey, Spain, the ongoing situation with now with the war with Ukraine and Russia, but they had like a conflict zone way before that. Most of the people you would ask on the street of Europe, what do you know about any other conflict zones in the world, they would have no idea. But everyone has some opinion, formed opinion about Israel just by reading the international news. And the sad thing about it is that Israel is not really getting an objective coverage of what is really happening on the ground, because we are such a tiny country. Less than 10 million people living in Israel, 8 million are Jews, and just imagine we're surrounded by, you name it, any other country that has a war with us, Lebanon, Syria, all the countries around us, Iran obviously. So number-wise, we're outnumbered by Muslims who are hostile to Israel, doing a great job in changing the narrative or inventing a new narrative in order to fight Israel in the media sphere. So you have so much content on social media and so much content on international media trying to bash Israel, whilst Israel is such a tiny place trying to fight, for the truth and for Western values, and it's literally the only democracy in the Middle East. And it's really hard to fight that battle. But what hurts me the most is to see Western media outlets like BBC, like CNN, that really understands. Israel is not the only country who suffers from Islamic terrorism. You have Al-Qaeda, and you have ISIS, and you have so many different, Boko Haram in Africa, so many different terror organizations harming innocent civilians around the world, that it's not like Israel is a special place of suffering from terrorism, but somewhat, when terrorism is occurring in Israel, for them, it's okay. It's okay to kill Jews. So you can't just not understand that a part of the false coverage has to do with anti-Semitism, like purely anti-Semitism. And today you can't really define between an Israel approach and an anti-Semitism approach, because it's all combines all together. So in my eyes, it's just absurd whenever there's a terror attack in Israel. The headline would be a Palestinian was being killed by a police officer when that Palestinian was actually murdering Jews a second ago. And for the average European American reading the news, they don't know any better than what really happened on the ground. There was a really annoying thing in a month of the Ramadan. It was, I think, 2018-19, where CNN did like a map showing all the different terror attacks around the world during the Ramadan month. The Ramadan month, fasting month of the Muslims. Usually a lot of terror organizations go on attacks worldwide. They published a map, all the different attacks. ISIS attack here, Boko Haram attack there, Hezbollah there. You see the whole European map with all the different attacks. What country wasn't on the map? Israel. The Israeli people got really annoyed, sending like petitions to CNN. How can you just avoid what is happening in Israel? We're suffering from the same Ramadan attacks. And CNN actually published an apology saying, we're sorry, here's a new updated map with the attacks that occur in Tel Aviv.
Well, CNN is a good example. And
so that's a good example on how we have the power at the end of the day to really change when the media is just spreading fake news, where the media is not really giving the true facts. But we have the opportunity to live, thankfully, in a time and age where we have social media. We have Facebook, we have Twitter. You can criticize journalists. 20 years ago, you would open up the television, you would hear what the correspondent is saying to you from the television. No one was really criticizing journalists. You would have think it's like a Torah from Sinai, what you're hearing on the news. And this day and age, you really understand that that's not the case. You can follow each journalist on Twitter. You can see what they're thinking about the vaccination. You can see what they're thinking about, terror issues. You can see what they're thinking about political issues, diplomatic issues. And you can really form your own opinion, get different sources of information. I always encourage people to get as many sources of information to get what is really happening, to talk to people who live in that city, who live in that country. Most people don't really have the opportunity to meet Israelis, to actually speak to Israelis who are serving the army, who lived in Israel, who are suffering for so many years from, it's not like when I joined the army, it was the first time I suffered from seeing with my own eyes how the Palestinians are trying, to harm Jews. But we had a war with Iraq. We had rockets from Iraq in the 90s. We had rockets from Lebanon in the Lebanon war, rockets from Gaza. So literally so many countries trying to wipe us off the map. And I think it's incredible what we've achieved in such a short time, 75 years of having a state.
Lital, let's personalise it to a couple of people, and can you contrast for me, and I'm sure you're aware of these cases, there was an Al Jazeera journalist killed, probably accidentally by the Israelis, versus the family of Rabbi Leo D. Rabbi D has been a guest on AJA. What was the difference in the media reaction?
But let me tell them, because I'm sure most of the people don't know about Rabbi Leo D. So about 2 months ago, there was a shooting attack in Judea and Samaria in Israel, not far from the Palestinian Authority. There was a Palestinian terrorist shooting at a family vehicle, literally killed half of the family. The mother, 2 daughters, and her husband, who was also speaking beautifully after they died, they murdered. Actually, what really annoyed me about this incident was news anchor of CNN, Christiana Manpour, went on her show and said there was a shootout, as if there were 2 entities shooting at one another, which, the matter of fact, was an innocent family driving around those roads, got terror attacked by a Palestinian terrorist shooting, killing half of the family. That also created a lot of commotion in Israel. People got annoyed at CNN, sending letters, sending emails, and she apologized a few days later. And Rabbi Leo D., who lost his wife and 2 daughters, he's actually British, he went online, spoke beautifully in Hebrew, and he said, "It was painful for me when a Palestinian terrorist killed my wife and 2 daughters. But it was more painful to hear a news anchor calling it a shootout, as if we've done anything wrong to anyone. We were just driving the road." And it was just so painful to see, because you're saying the Western media has just lost its connection between good and bad. And I cannot forget this one time I watched the European Sky News after the Charlie Hebdo attack. I don't know if you remember, ISIS went into a journalist news outlet, newspaper in Paris, shot 13 journalists, French journalists in Paris, only because they published a painting of Muhammad on the cover. For them, it was insulting that they're making fun of Prophet Muhammad. Went into their office and shot 13 French journalists. The next day, I'm opening the European Sky News, and they're having a debate. And there was this commentator saying, "I don't know who's good and who's bad in this story, because maybe we shouldn't have robbed Muhammad in their faces." And I'm listening to what she's saying, and I'm saying to myself, you don't know who's good and who's bad when terrorists are shooting journalists. 13 journalists were being murdered. You don't know who's good and who's bad. So in my eyes, the West is losing connection, just losing touch between good and bad, between evil and like democracies are trying to keep freedom of speech and trying to keep human rights. And we need to be aware. We need to be aware of those processes that are happening in so many countries.
We very much have the same problem here with the ABC and SBS in particular. And I want to give credit to Robert Gregory standing over there in the back, who has recently submitted a number of complaints which have been upheld to the regulatory authorities. I mean, it's a bit like closing the door after the horse has bolted, the damage has been done. But we have succeeded in having a few complaints with, not calling terrorists when they are, etc.
Yeah.
And just in the last 24 hours, there was a TV channel in the UK, an Islamic channel, which has been fined £40,000 for anti-Semitic material by the regulator.
Wow.
I want to switch gear a bit. I know you're happy to take any questions about Israel.
Yeah, of course.
What's happening with the possibility of Israeli sovereignty in Judea Samaria? It seems to come and go all the time in the political debate, and there was some talk with the election of the current government there might actually be some progress in extending sovereignty. What do you see happening?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't see any critical changes in Israel's policy in the upcoming year because Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu's main focus at the moment in achieving a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. And in order to achieve that, you need to keep like all the different spheres kind of quiet.
Yeah.
So he's trying not to create any extreme movements in all the different directions regarding security, regarding the border with Lebanon, the border with Gaza. So the same with Judea and Samaria at the moment in order to achieve peace, and that's basically his main goal after achieving 4 peace agreements with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan in 2020. Now his main goal is to achieve a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, and once he will achieve that, that would be an enormous achievement for him as a prime minister. So he's trying to keep it quiet in all the different areas. The Palestinians only 2 weeks ago had their first ever delegation to Saudi Arabia, because now they're starting to kind of try and see what they can get out of it. Israel, I think, should be strong and not allow them to try and get something out of it, because at the end of the day, it's countries who are understanding that they want to create fruitful relationships. We share the same interests, we share the same enemy, Iran. Iran is also a joint enemy to Saudi Arabia and to the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and they can just, it will be beneficial for everyone to strengthen the ties, basically.
Bibi is quoted as saying recently that there won't be a Palestinian state, that what some people call the two-state solution is non-existent. How do you read that? Is it dead from an Israeli perspective? I mean, we hope it is, but
Yeah.
What's your view?
I think throughout the years, Israel and Israelis came to an understanding that if it was up to us, we would have had peace long ago. Israel offered the Palestinians in the past decades almost 100% of their demands. Time and again, they've said no. And the number one reason for them to say no is not because they don't want peace, is simply they don't want the Israeli state, the only Jewish state, to exist. They want the annihilation of the state of Israel. The more you're keeping the Palestinian issue a thing, in the Arab world, the more you're maintaining the hope for the destruction of the state of Israel. The Palestinians were never a people, they were never an interest of anyone in the Arab world. You have Palestinians in Lebanon, you have Palestinians in Syria, in Jordan. It's tribes living all across the Middle East. The only thing that's uniting the Arab world around the Palestinians are to maintain the problem, because once you're maintaining the problem, you're maintaining the hope for them to, make Israel an Arab state, get rid of the only Jewish state in the world. So it's just an ongoing narrative, and I think that if the Palestinians would have wanted peace, they could have had peace long ago. I find it sad for the Palestinian people to have such a corrupted government, both in Gaza and in the Palestinian Authority. Because just look at what Israel has accomplished in 75 years. Israel is a young country. I'm literally in the beginning of my people's history as coming back to our homeland. My grandparents didn't have a state. They kept their Judaism traditions and celebrating the holidays in the diaspora all over the world. So I'm so privileged to have the opportunity to actually live in a Jewish state and protect my Jewish state. So if the Palestinians, and I'm looking at the Palestinians, what they have done in 70 years since the establishment of the State of Israel, and I think it makes me sad, because if you define yourself as a pro-Palestinian, you should be on the side of Israel, who is actually wanting peace, who is actually wanting all of their neighbors to flourish and to thrive. And you can see a lot of demonstrations within the Palestinian Authority, within Gaza, saying to their own leadership, saying to Hamas, saying to the Palestinian Authority, where is the money going? You're getting millions, billions of dollars from European countries, from the US, and the money is not going to us. We live a poor life. The money is just going to the corrupted government. So I think the world, if the world wants to see peace in that region one day, they should push the Palestinians and not Israel. Because Israel is the easy route, you know? It's easy to speak to Israel, it's easy to push Israel, it's easy to criticize Israel because Israel is a Western country, but the matter of fact is you need to push the Palestinians. You need to have them, they deserve a better leadership.
The last issue I want you to comment on, Lital, before we open it up to questions, is indeed criticism of Israel, but criticism of Israel coming from the Jewish diaspora. Our organisation takes the view that it's not constructive to publicly criticise Israel if you're in the diaspora. By all means, you can have a variety of views, but I've shown you some examples of Australian Jewish organisations that have made quite cutting criticism of Israel. How do you see that? What's the role of the Jewish diaspora with regard to Israel?
That's an excellent question, and I will have a bit of a complex answer, because in the one hand, I think the diaspora Jews has all the rights to criticize Israel, because at the end of the day, the Israeli state was established with the help of Jews in the diaspora, with money that was sent to Israel to establish facilities and universities. Jews were donating money to Israel at the beginning of the first year of its establishment, helping Israel to build it from the ground up. So we needed the diaspora Jews to establish the state of Israel, and we had a strong connection, ongoing connection with Jews in the diaspora. So I think every Jewish person has its own right to criticize Israel and to openly form his or her opinion about what is happening in Israel. On the other hand, I'm seeing a lot of Jewish organizations actively trying to change policies regarding Israeli, internal things. For example, the left-wing organization, U.S. organization J Street, was sending letters to members of Congress in America, urging them to sign the Iranian deal. Whilst in Israel, there was a consensus between left and right that the Iranian deal is bad for Israel. So when I'm seeing Jews actively working to change Israeli policies or American policies that would harm Israel, and at the end of the day, the Iranian deal would harm us, Israelis, more than anyone else in the world, I think that's a bad thing to do. So you need to know where the line draws between expressing your opinions and actively trying to change policies that will harm us as Israelis. Because when someone is saying to me, you should clear Judea and Samaria, you should, evacuate this and that city, I'm thinking to myself, I'm the one living in Israel. I'm the one who would have to take the consequences of getting rockets from Ramallah to my airport, to Ben Gurion's airport. So how can someone who lives in America can tell me what to do when at the end of the day it's my safety?
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Lital. I could go on. There's 1,000 things to ask you, but I think it's only fair to open to questions. And John, you're first. I'll turn off the recording now so that I don't want anyone to feel under an obligation that their words are going elsewhere.
Lital, you mentioned the Abraham Accords.